Hello, friends. That was Mildred, and this is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a stunning news development in the world of classical music. And oh my goodness, I have to say, if this is what people regard as important, then you have to kind of question their priorities. But that's okay, because the news is the news, and we're on a 24-hour news cycle, and any little tidbit, no matter how uninteresting or dreary, becomes rife for speculation and excited gossipy chatter. So I'm just going with the flow. Here's the news. Klaus Mäkelä, the Ken doll of classical music, has terminated his relationship with the Oslo Philharmonic, or alternately, the Oslo Philharmonic has terminated their relationship with Klaus Mäkelä, the Ken doll of classical music, a year early. Yes, a year early. He is departing. And that means a few things. You know, there's going to be a lot of speculation about who decided to dump who. And I don't really think it matters, because what we learn from this incident is that it is physically impossible to be the music director of everything simultaneously. You just can't do it. Even a 28, 29-year-old wunderkind can't possibly manage a career where you are spending your entire life zipping around the universe, popping in and popping out and conducting, and maintain any realistic standard of quality. And it's actually rather significant that this is happening now. And yes, I have a certain feeling of schadenfreude about the whole thing because, I told you so. But the interesting thing is that this is not the first time something like this has happened to Mr. Mäkelä in his young career. You may recall that he had formed a power alliance with Yuja Wang. The two of them were the couple, and they had all kinds of concerts scheduled because they were screwing each other and they were going to be, a thing. Well, then they weren't a thing. And a lot of those events had to be canceled because they weren't getting along and they weren't going to be performing together anymore like they used to be. It just goes to show how quick the classical music industry is to jump on the latest thing in a premature way without any kind of sensibility about, well, let's hire everybody 500 years in advance and, this is going to be great and everyone's going to come and show up and it's going to be a thrilling thing and has nothing to do with music. Nothing at all. It has to do with star power. And the classical music world is transfixed by the pop music world, by the big star, the Hollywood Walk of Fame thing, the idea that somehow the classical music industry can become its own version of big, popular music, mega star sort of thing. They're into that. And they're into that particularly because they've hired and they now operate on a PR model, which is sort of like a pathetic simulacrum of what happens in the popular music world. So you've got all these people who worry about, their artist's image and their PR and all of that junk. And so that's what's motivating decisions. And the decision, of course, to hire Klaus Mäkelä for, every orchestra in the world is one of those things. Because remember, he's in Oslo and they had just extended his contract. And now they've de-extended his contract. And while I'm sure they will be extremely tight-lipped about the reasons why, and so will he, it doesn't happen for good reason. Nobody leaves a contract early, by mutual degree or not, unless something is really wrong. So we don't have to speculate about the reasons why. It's really, they obviously aren't getting along. He has obviously not lived up to his side of the bargain. The orchestra's lived up to theirs. They have a contract. So they make themselves available for him to conduct. It's obviously his problem. And that does not bode well for a young career, somebody who is excessively ambitious. I mean, we know the excuses that he's already given for this. He said that, he needs to have personal time to take care of his pet gerbil, which has become, the love of his life now that Yuja Wang's not around. And of course, he has a whole bunch of prize-winning orchids that he's raising in his copious spare time, and they're taking his time and attention. He has other hobbies, other loves, besides just running around the world waving a stick at people. So yes, that will be the official line, but we know it's nonsense. We absolutely know it's nonsense. Yes, of course, his gerbil may have separation anxiety, and it's nice to be good to your gerbil. But that's not what's really going on. And the orchids don't care whether he's home or not. So he's got a problem. And that problem, I suspect, is only going to get worse, because if the recordings are any, indication, he is an ill-prepared, immature artist at this stage. And for him to resolve that, he's going to have to slow down, get his priorities in order, and spend some time doing just, whatever he's physically and mentally capable of doing to the highest ability. He may have no highest ability. We don't know yet. We really don't know yet. I got a comment recently. It was really very funny. It's the usual, oh, how could you possibly be so mean to poor little Klaus Mäkelä? Anybody who can conduct the orchestras in Vienna and Berlin and Chicago and must be really, really good, must be really, really talented. Well, no, they don't have to be. The orchestras are really, really good. They're better than the conductor. And they're looking to bring in an audience. And if they can exploit his star power to bring in an audience, that's what they're going to do. But at some point, and it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter how talented he is. He could be an AI thing, and that would be if that's what would sell, that's what they do. There's no question about that. So the bottom line is that at some point, the musical result is going to suffer. I believe his recordings are already evidence of that suffering because they're so mediocre and uninteresting. I know some people have said they're the hottest thing since sliced bread, but we can ignore that. That's not true. We have the recorded evidence, and we know better, at least those of us who, understand the discography of the works that he's recording. And so he and Oslo are on the outs. Now, of course, it may be that he's going to take over Boston now that Andres Nelson's is on the outs in Boston. Now, a much messier breakup. It could be that the evidence of the Boston breakup has motivated this velvet divorce between Mäkelä and Oslo. They don't want to have a whole simus, as we say in Yiddish, a whole mess over the whole thing. But, whatever the reason, it looks like, he the business giveth and the business taketh away. He's acquired a huge amount of responsibility for a person of his age and his limited, thus far, ability. And we got to see whether he's really going to be able to handle it. Even if his season's only 10 weeks or 14 weeks or whatever it is. Usually, you can do 500 orchestras because being the music director doesn't mean anything anymore. It means you're there, a handful of times out of the year. And then you can jet off someplace else. It's not a life that I think anybody would want. I think it's really much nicer to stay home with your pet gerbil, if that's what you can do, and raise your orchids and do other things. I don't know how many of you remember the television show Murphy Brown, but there was that wonderful, wonderful episode where Murphy Brown was at the Olympics in Oslo. Actually, it's in Oslo, wasn't it? Yes, it was in Oslo, actually. Coincidentally, it was the Winter Olympics in Oslo. And Murphy Brown did an interview with the hottest young Norwegian local skating star. She was a figure skater. And she said to her, "So, what do you do with your life?" She says, "Well, I skate." She says, "Well, what do you think about when you're not skating?" And she says, "Skating?" and "Do you have any friends?" She says, "Oh, my coaches and other skaters." And finally she says, "Don't you have a life? Don't you do anything? Aren't you interested in anything? How can you, And of course, the skater winds up quitting. I mean, she doesn't quit, but she decides she's going to go do her thing, and she falls all over the place and disgraces herself and the entire country in the process. It's a bit like that. What else does this guy now have that's going to make him a well-rounded, interesting human being? Somebody whose life experience somehow translates into a comprehensive and extensive range of feeling, of musical expression. I mean, if all he's got is his gerbil and a terminated affair with Yuja Wang, he's got a problem as an interpreter of music that delves the depths of human experience. Don't you think? And with his upcoming commitments to every orchestra in the universe, you have to wonder, how thin can he stretch himself? We're going to find out. And it's going to be a very, very, very interesting story, which is why I'm talking about it now. So keep on listening, friends, and stay tuned. Take care.